July 17, 1905. Long Island, New York. Imagine standing in a wheat field at midnight, watching the sky itself come alive with electricity. The air crackles. Your hair stands on end. And towering before you, a monument to human ambition rises 187 feet into the darkness. Wardenclyffe Tower, Tesla's tower. But in our world, this tower was never completed. The funding dried up. J.P. Morgan pulled his support. The dream died. The tower was demolished in 1917, sold for scrap to pay Tesla's debts. But what if Morgan had believed? What if the world's most powerful banker had looked at Nikola Tesla's wireless energy transmission system and said, yes, what if Tesla received unlimited funding? Tonight, we're going to show you the world that could have been. A world where energy flows through the air like radio waves, where power lines never existed, where the entire trajectory of the 20th century bent around one man's vision. This is not science fiction. This is alternative history, and it begins with a choice that was never made. To understand what changes, we must first understand what happened. By 1901, Nikola Tesla was already a legend. The man who had won the war of currents. The inventor whose alternating current system powered Niagara Falls and lit up the Chicago World's Fair. His patents had made Westinghouse Electric a powerhouse, and George Westinghouse himself called Tesla the most brilliant man he'd ever met. But Tesla's mind had moved beyond mere wires and generators. He envisioned something unprecedented: wireless power transmission. Not radio signals carrying information, but actual usable electrical energy transmitted through the Earth itself and the upper atmosphere. He called it his world wireless system. In our timeline, Tesla convinced J.P. Morgan to invest $150,000, about $4.5 million in today's money. It wasn't enough. As Tesla's ambitions grew, as the tower rose higher, as he demanded more funding, Morgan refused. Quote, "If anyone can draw on the power, where do we put the meter?" Morgan wanted to control and commodify electricity. Tesla wanted to give it to humanity. The funding stopped. But in our alternative timeline, something different happens. Perhaps Tesla demonstrates a working prototype that's too impressive to ignore. Perhaps Morgan has a vision of controlling the infrastructure instead of the power itself. Perhaps another financier, Andrew Carnegie, or a consortium of European investors, steps in where Morgan hesitated. Whatever the catalyst, the money flows, and Wardenclyffe is completed. December 12, 1905, the date that divides history. In our timeline, this date means nothing. But in the timeline we're exploring, it's the day everything changed. Wardenclyffe Tower stands complete, a cathedral of the electrical age. Its foundation descends 120 feet into the Long Island earth, a labyrinth of iron pipes driven deep to make contact with the ground currents. The tower itself rises like a giant mushroom, its dome 55 feet in diameter, sheeted in copper that gleams like a second sun. Inside the facility, Tesla has installed his magnifying transmitter, a massive Tesla coil capable of generating voltages in the millions. The theoretical calculations are sound. He's proven the concept with smaller models in his Colorado Springs laboratory, where he once lit 200 lamps from 26 miles away without any wires. But this is the real test. Investors have gathered, scientists, journalists, the skeptics who called him a dreamer, and at precisely 8 in the evening, Tesla throws the switch. The sound is like the earth itself roaring. The dome erupts with electrical fire, streamers of purple and blue lightning arcing into the night sky. For 50 miles in every direction, the air itself becomes charged. Compass needles spin wildly. And then, in laboratories Tesla has set up across Long Island, New York City, even as far as Boston, light bulbs begin to glow, with no wires, no connections, just receivers tuned to the frequency of the Earth itself. The age of wireless power has begun. The implications hit like a tidal wave. Within months, Tesla's demonstration has attracted funding from around the world. The British Empire, desperate to maintain technological superiority, offers Tesla £10 million to build a network of towers across their territories. Kaiser Wilhelm's Germany counters with their own proposal. Even the Russian Empire, perpetually behind in industrialization, sees this as their chance to leap forward. But here's where our alternative timeline splits into two possible paths, and the choice matters enormously. In one version, Tesla maintains control, insisting that the technology be used for the benefit of all humanity. He creates the Tesla Energy Foundation, a nonprofit that licenses the technology freely to any nation that agrees to certain principles. The energy must be accessible to all citizens, not just the wealthy. Towers must be built to cover rural areas first, bringing electricity to farmers and villages that traditional infrastructure would never reach. The technology cannot be weaponized. This is the utopian path, and it's complicated. In the second version, Tesla partners with governments and corporations, accepting that control and profit are the price of rapid deployment. Westinghouse, General Electric, and European conglomerates race to build tower networks. The technology spreads faster, but it's commodified, metered, controlled. Let's explore both, because both tell us something profound about technology and human nature. Let's follow the first path. By 1910, 57 Tesla towers dot the Earth. The Tesla Energy Foundation operates them all, funded by a combination of government contracts and wealthy philanthropists who have bought into the vision. Andrew Carnegie, haunted by the memory of his own workers dying in steel mills without basic safety equipment or electricity, becomes Tesla's most ardent supporter. The effects are staggering. Rural electrification, which in our timeline took until the 1930s and 40s in America, happens by 1912. Farmers in Kansas have the same access to electrical power as factory owners in New York. In India and Africa, villages that would have waited until the 1960s or later suddenly have power for lighting, water pumping, basic machinery. The social implications cascade. With abundant, cheap electrical power, industrialization accelerates in unexpected places. The American South, which remained largely agricultural in our timeline, becomes a manufacturing center. Eastern Europe, no longer dependent on coal and the railroads to transport it, industrializes rapidly. This disrupts the political tensions leading to World War I. The alliance systems were partly about controlling resources: coal, steel, oil. But with wireless energy, the resource map changes. Austria-Hungary, no longer energy-starved, has less incentive to expand aggressively into the Balkans. Russia, suddenly able to power its industries without massive infrastructure investments, becomes economically stronger, which paradoxically makes its government more stable. The desperation that fueled the 1917 revolution might never materialize, but here's the dark side of utopia. The technology that frees humanity also creates new vulnerabilities. December 1914. In our timeline, the Great War has begun. In our alternative timeline, the situation is different but no less dangerous, because Tesla's wireless energy system has a flaw he never fully acknowledged. It's vulnerable, incredibly vulnerable. Each tower is a single point of failure. Destroy a tower and thousands of square miles go dark instantly. And the towers themselves, they're enormous targets, impossible to hide, impossible to move. Military strategists around the world have done the calculations. In the event of war, the first objective would be to destroy the enemy's Tesla towers. This creates a new form of total war. Not trenches and machine guns, but commando raids and sabotage. Imagine elite teams of engineers and demolition experts racing to take out towers before their enemies can respond. The war that does eventually come, and human nature suggests one would, is faster, more decisive, and potentially more devastating. Cities don't slowly starve under blockade. They go dark instantly when their tower falls. Hospitals, water systems, transportation, all dependent on wireless power, all vulnerable. Tesla, in our timeline, was horrified by the weaponization of his inventions. In this alternative world, his horror is amplified 1,000-fold. He's created the infrastructure upon which civilization depends, and that infrastructure is fragile. Some historians of this alternative timeline speculate that this vulnerability actually prevents large-scale war. The doctrine of mutually assured darkness. If you destroy our towers, we destroy yours, and we all return to the pre-industrial age overnight. It's deterrence through fragility. Others argue the opposite. That the temptation to strike first, to cripple an enemy's power grid before they can respond, makes war more likely, not less. Now let's rewind and explore the second path, the corporate timeline. Here, Tesla takes the money from Morgan, Westinghouse, General Electric, and builds his network through private enterprise. The deployment is faster. By 1912, there are over 200 towers globally, concentrated in profitable markets. Major cities, industrial centers, mining operations. The technology spreads rapidly because there's profit in it. But access is controlled, metered, the promise of free energy. It never materializes. Instead, the tower companies charge for receivers, charge for access, charge for bandwidth on the electromagnetic spectrum. It's the same monopolistic behavior that characterized the railroad barons and oil tycoons, just with a new technology. The social stratification is stark. Wealthy neighborhoods have reliable wireless power. Poor neighborhoods, they're either not covered or they get intermittent service, deliberately throttled to encourage upgrades to premium plans. Tesla, in this timeline, becomes phenomenally wealthy, but he's also increasingly bitter. This isn't what he envisioned. He wanted to light the world, and instead he's created a new form of control. By 1920, he's publicly denouncing the corporations that bear his name, calling them traitors to his vision. He becomes a tragic figure, the inventor whose creation was corrupted by the very system he needed to fund it. But the technological advancement is undeniable. With massive corporate funding, the wireless power system becomes more efficient, more sophisticated. By the 1920s, receivers are small enough to be portable. Electric cars, using wireless power instead of heavy batteries, become practical. Aviation takes a revolutionary leap forward. Aircraft powered by wireless energy transmitted from ground stations have effectively unlimited range and endurance. Regardless of which path we follow, the cascade effects on technology are profound. Consider transportation. In our timeline, we built internal combustion engines because they were portable energy sources. But with wireless power, that necessity vanishes. Electric motors, fed by ambient power from Tesla's system, become the standard. This means no petroleum industry as we know it. Oil remains a curiosity, used for lubrication and chemicals, but not fuel. The geopolitics of the 20th century, so dominated by oil, never happens. The Middle East develops along entirely different lines. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq. These nations don't become wealthy oil powers. Colonial powers don't have the same strategic interest in the region. The entire Israel-Palestine situation potentially develops differently without British and American oil interests shaping policy. Consider aviation. The Wright brothers' achievement at Kitty Hawk in 1903 still happens, but within a decade, aircraft are using wireless power. This solves the fundamental problem that limited early aviation: weight. Fuel is heavy. Electric motors powered wirelessly are light and efficient. By 1920, passenger aviation is common. By 1930, people are talking about crossing the Atlantic in hours, not days. The space race, it begins decades early. Without the weight of fuel, rocket equations change dramatically. Tesla himself, living into the 1940s in this timeline, wealthier and healthier thanks to better medical care powered by his own invention, becomes obsessed with wireless power transmission to spacecraft. Imagine satellites powered by ground-based Tesla towers. Imagine lunar bases that don't need nuclear reactors or solar panels, just receivers tuned to transmissions from Earth. But let's be honest about the costs, because this technological revolution isn't free. The electromagnetic spectrum is now saturated with power transmission frequencies. Radio communication becomes more challenging, requiring more sophisticated equipment to filter out the power signals. Some wildlife, particularly birds that navigate by Earth's magnetic field, struggle with the interference. Migration patterns shift. certain species decline. Tesla himself becomes aware of these issues too late. The towers also create dead zones, areas where the power transmission interferes with human biology. Workers who spend too much time near active towers develop strange symptoms. Headaches, insomnia, what we might today recognize as electromagnetic hypersensitivity. The Tesla Energy Foundation or the tower corporations, depending on our timeline, struggle to address these concerns. Regulations are established. Exclusion zones around towers. Limits on power levels. But thousands have already been affected. And then there's the question of innovation. With wireless power solved so early and so completely, does humanity become complacent? In our real timeline, the challenges of power storage and generation drove innovation in batteries, fuel cells, alternative energy. The search for better solutions never stopped. In Tesla's timeline, with one dominant system, does that innovation stall? Do we fail to develop technologies that might have been even better? It's the paradox of the optimal solution. Sometimes the best answer to today's problem prevents us from finding tomorrow's breakthrough. Let's return to the question of World War I. In our timeline, it killed 17 million people and shattered empires. In our alternative timeline, does it happen? The arguments for prevention are compelling. The economic interconnection created by the wireless power grid makes nations dependent on each other's stability. You don't bomb your neighbor's country when your own factories depend on receiver equipment manufactured there. The resource competition that drove colonial expansion is reduced. Coal deposits, oil fields, they matter less when energy is transmitted wirelessly. But human nature doesn't change. Nationalism, ethnic tensions, the desire for glory and conquest, these don't disappear because of technology. What likely happens is a different kind of conflict. Shorter, more decisive, fought with different weapons. Some military historians of this alternative timeline point to the Balkan Crisis of 1915, a 3-week conflict in which Serbian saboteurs destroyed the Austro-Hungarian tower network, plunging Vienna into darkness, before Austrian airborne troops captured Belgrade and restored power. A war measured in days, not years. Thousands dead, not millions. Others point to the wireless wars of the 1920s, a series of corporate conflicts that became militarized when competing tower networks used jamming technology against each other, effectively holding entire regions hostage. Imagine armed confrontations between General Electric's security forces and Westinghouse's paramilitary engineers, fighting for control of the electromagnetic spectrum in South America. It's a strange kind of warfare. Bloodier than we'd like, but not the meat grinder of the song. In our real timeline, Nikola Tesla died alone in room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel in January 1943. He was 86 years old, broke, feeding pigeons, largely forgotten by a world that had moved beyond him. His funeral was attended by 2,000 people who still remembered his genius, but he died owing thousands in hotel bills, his most ambitious dreams unrealized. In our alternative timeline, it's different. Whether he took the utopian path or the corporate path, Tesla in 1943 is a figure of immense historical importance. If he chose the corporate route, he's wealthy beyond measure, but haunted by the corruption of his vision. He spends his final decades funding free clinics, libraries, and schools, trying to give back what he feels he took by allowing his technology to be monopolized. If he chose the utopian path, he's less wealthy, but more satisfied. The Tesla Energy Foundation has brought power to 3 billion people. Rural villages in Asia, Africa, South America, places that in our timeline would wait generations for electricity, have it because of his invention. In both timelines, he receives the Nobel Prize in Physics, which in our real timeline he was nominated for but never won. He's knighted by the British Empire. Universities name departments after him. And on his deathbed, surrounded by engineers and scientists who revolutionized the world using his principles, he makes one final statement. A journalist records it. Tesla's last words in this timeline are, "I gave you the lightning. What you built with it, whether cathedrals or prisons, that was your choice." I only hope that somewhere, somehow, a child is reading by light that flows from the earth itself, free as the air we breathe. If that exists, even once I succeeded. So what does the world of the late 20th century look like in Tesla's timeline? By 1980, the wireless power grid is ubiquitous. Fifth-generation towers use solid-state technology, quantum-tuned transmitters that can send power with 98% efficiency. The receivers are microscopic, embedded in every device. Your watch, your calculator, your artificial heart, all powered wirelessly, batteries a historical curiosity. The environmental impact is complex. On one hand, no fossil fuel power plants means dramatically less air pollution. Cities are cleaner. Respiratory diseases are rarer. Climate change, caused primarily by CO2 emissions from burning coal and oil, is not the existential threat it is in our timeline. The atmosphere in 2024 would contain perhaps 320 parts per million of carbon dioxide instead of our 420. But those Tesla towers still need power generation. In the utopian timeline, they're fed by hydroelectric, geothermal, and eventually fusion reactors, distributed globally to serve the tower network. In the corporate timeline, the power generation is more concentrated, leading to localized environmental damage even as global emissions stay lower. The political map is radically different. Without oil dependency, the United States never develops its close alliance with Saudi Arabia. The Cold War, if it happens, is fought over control of tower networks and transmission frequencies, not nuclear weapons and oil fields. The Soviet Union, with abundant wireless power enabling Siberian development, might actually have succeeded economically, never collapsing in 1991. And space exploration? We're not just on the moon. We're living there in bases powered by massive Tesla towers on Earth, transmitting energy across the void. Mars missions are powered the same way. Humanity has become a multi-planetary species, decades ahead of our timeline. Here's what haunts me about this alternative timeline. We can map the technology. We can trace the political implications. We can imagine the cities and the spacecraft and the transformed world. But there's one question that alternative history can never truly answer. Would we be happier? Would humanity, with all its power transmitted wirelessly, with energy abundant and cheap, with the material problems solved, would we be more fulfilled? Or would we just find new things to fight over, new scarcities to create, new divisions to enforce? Tesla believed in human potential. He thought that if you gave people the tools, they would build paradise. But he also saw, even in our timeline, how his inventions were turned to war, to profit, to control. In the timeline where wireless energy succeeded, we have to imagine both versions of humanity. The version that uses unlimited power to educate every child, to cure diseases, to reach the stars. And the version that uses it to build more efficient weapons, more insidious forms of surveillance, more sophisticated means of oppression. Technology is a mirror. It reflects what we are, amplified. Tesla's wireless energy system would have been the most powerful mirror humanity ever created. And what would we have seen looking back at ourselves? I'd like to think we'd see the better angels of our nature. That abundance would create generosity. That power freely given would inspire nobility. But history, even alternative history, teaches us to be skeptical of utopian dreams. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. A world of marvels and wonders, yes, but also a world of new problems, new inequities, new struggles. We return, finally, to that moment in J.P. Morgan's office, to the choice that was never made. Nikola Tesla stood there with his blueprints and his dreams, and Morgan said no. And maybe that was the right choice. Not because Tesla's technology wouldn't have worked. All evidence suggests it would have. Not because it wouldn't have transformed the world. It absolutely would have. But because humanity in 1901 wasn't ready for that much power that quickly. We hadn't yet learned the lessons we needed to learn. The hard lessons about regulation, about environmental stewardship, about global cooperation. Maybe we needed the 20th century to be exactly as it was. The struggles and the suffering and the slow, hard-won progress. Maybe we needed to build our power grid the hard way, with copper wires and coal plants and all the mistakes we made, because those mistakes taught us something essential about ourselves. Or maybe that's just what we tell ourselves to justify the timeline we're stuck in. Maybe in the Tesla timeline, they look at their history and say, "Thank God Morgan took the risk. Thank God someone believed. Look at what we built." We'll never know. We can only imagine. But imagination is powerful. It shows us what's possible. It reveals the paths not taken. And it reminds us that history isn't inevitable. It's a series of choices. And right now, in our timeline, we're making choices about technology that will echo for generations, about artificial intelligence, about genetic engineering, about quantum computing and nanotechnology and fusion power. The next Nikola Tesla is out there somewhere with blueprints for something revolutionary, and someone is deciding whether to fund it or not, whether to take the risk or play it safe. When you think about it that way, we're not studying alternative history, we're studying ourselves. Trying to understand what we do when genius knocks on the door and asks for a chance to change everything. Do we open the door, or do we let it walk away, wondering forever what might have been? That's the question Nikola Tesla forces us to ask, and it's the question we still haven't answered.